The dawn came pale and trembling over the valley, light spilling down the ridges like milk poured slow from heaven. A woman stood there, her breath fogging the air, her hands raw from work that should have been shared by two. Each strike of her axe rang sharp through the stillness, sending small echoes rolling through pine and frost. She worked steady, not fast, the kind of rhythm that comes from grief turned into purpose. Her name was Clara Hensley, and folks said she'd left a fine home back east to start again out here, in the wild silence of the frontier. Some whispered she was running from sorrow. Others said she was simply too proud to stay where pity had eyes dot up on the ridge. A man reined in his horse and watched her a while. The wind tugged at his coat, dust curling around his boots. Eli McGraw, a widower 3 years lonesome, had seen his share of people breaking under life's weight. But the sight of her, small against the vast woods, shoulders trembling yet unyielding, stirred something buried in him. He didn't know her name then, only that she swung that axe like she meant to carve a place in the world that had forgotten her. When she first rode into town, weeks before, it was with one mule, a trunk of tools, and a letter she never spoke of. Martha Boyle at the inn had taken one look at her mud-streaked skirt and decided right there she wouldn't last the winter. "A woman alone don't build nothing but trouble," she told Deputy Kate Rowan over coffee. Kate had only shrugged. "Still, she's got the look of someone who's done being told what she can't do." And sure enough, by the next sunrise, Clara was gone, a trail of wheel marks heading north into the trees, toward a patch of land the town had long forgotten. The days that followed were marked by sound, the crack of logs splitting, the scrape of saw teeth, the hollow ring of hammer against wood. Travelers passing through spoke of seeing smoke rise from the foothills. "The lady fool's building herself a cabin," they'd laugh. "Won't last till frost bites." Yet she kept at it. Her hands blistered and bled, and when blood met wood, she'd wrap her palms and keep going. By evening, her shoulders shook from exhaustion, but she'd light a small lantern in the half-built shell and hum to herself, a tune so soft it barely reached the trees. Sometimes she found things she hadn't left. A neat stack of split firewood by the creek, a repaired handle on her broken spade, a trail of hoof prints leading away into mist. Once she whispered into the open air, "Thank you," though she wasn't sure anyone was listening. From far up the ridge, Eli heard her voice carried faint on the wind. He'd smile a little, though no one ever saw it. The gossip swelled the way dust does in summer, dry and restless. Martha, quick with her tongue, told anyone who'd listened that McGraw had been seen riding near Clara's claim. "Ain't right," she'd say, half smirking. "A man's got his ghosts. Don't need another woman to add to him." Soon folks in the mercantile were whispering about the widow and the cowboy, about late nights and secret kindness. When Clara came in for flour and nails, the chatter stopped sharp. She felt their stares like heat against her neck, but kept her chin level. She paid with what coin she had, gathered her sack, and walked out without a word. That night, the wind howled through her half-made walls. Alone by the dim lantern, she set her jaw and wiped at tears that weren't weakness, just weariness finding a way out. She'd learned long ago that loneliness had its own kind of price, the cost of being misunderstood by people who hadn't known hunger or silence or work done for survival's sake. She whispered into the shadows, "Let them talk," and the woods gave no answer but the low groan of branches. Eli McGraw stayed away from town after that. He didn't want to hear what folks thought of him or her. He spent his days mending fences and nights staring at the framed photograph of his wife and little boy. The picture had faded with years, the edges curled. "Don't start caring, McGraw," he muttered one evening, setting it face down on the shelf. But the next morning, when he heard thunder rolling and saw dark clouds pressing low over the valley, he saddled his horse without thinking where he was headed. By midday, rain came in sheets. The forest dripped and hissed. Clara's roof beams creaked under the weight of water. She braced herself against a falling timber, boots sinking in the mud, shoulders straining. Then a hand, rough, calloused, familiar, gripped the beam beside hers. "Careful," a voice said. She turned, rain blurring his face. Eli stood there, soaked through, eyes intent. Together they pushed the beam upright and lashed it down with rope. For a moment, their fingers brushed, both cold, both trembling. She looked at him, truly looked, and saw a man carved from the same quiet suffering she carried. When the roof held, She stepped back, chest heaving. "Thank you," she said, barely above the rain. He tipped his hat, water streaming off its brim. "Can't build walls alone forever, ma'am." Then he turned and left before she could reply. Only hoof prints remained in the mud. The next dawn came clear and silver. Clara woke to find her foundation reinforced, nails driven straight, corners squared. Someone had worked through the night. She stood a long while, staring at the fresh wood, hand resting on the beam as if to feel the pulse of kindness still in it. When evening came, she lit her lantern again and set it in the window, not as a plea, but a quiet thank you to the dark hills beyond. Up there, Eli watched that tiny flame flicker against the night, a single point of light in all that emptiness. Something in his chest stirred, an ache that wasn't pain this time, but memory turning soft at the edges, and in that soft silence between them, unseen, something began. The snow melted slow that spring, leaving behind the smell of wet earth and pine. Days stretched long again, and so did the work. Clara was out early, sleeves rolled, hair tied with a strip of linen, stacking what lumber she had left when a wagon's creak broke the quiet. She looked up to see Eli McGraw coming down the trail, reins loose, a wagon bed full of boards. He stopped near her fence and climbed down, the leather of his gloves creaking as he did. "For your roof," he said simply. "I can't pay you," she answered. He nodded once, eyes steady. "You already are." Her brow furrowed. "How?" He leaned against the wagon and smiled, faint, tired, but real. "With the way you don't quit." They shared coffee on the cabin steps, steam curling between them in the cool morning. Neither spoke much. Words would have ruined the stillness. The silence felt good, like something earned. When he finally stood to leave, she said softly, "You're welcome to come by, if you've a mind to." He touched the brim of his hat, but didn't promise. Just mounted and rode off into the brightening day to be why the time word reached town that Eli McGraw had been seen helping the widow. The gossip spread faster than wildfire on prairie grass. At the mercantile, Martha Boyle crossed her arms and declared, "If he's got any sense left, he'll keep his distance." Deputy Rowan, always mild, only said, "Ain't nothing sinful about decency." Still, tongues wagged. Folks needed something to talk about besides drought and taxes. They spoke of Clara's cabin like it was a scandal. But when Eli passed through town for feed, his eyes didn't flinch at their stares. "Let him talk," he muttered. "Talk's all they got left." That night, a wind came howling down from the ridge. It started as a whisper through the trees, then turned wild, slamming shutters, shaking the unfinished roof beams. Inside her cabin, Clara knelt by the small stove, coaxing a weak fire. One spark jumped to a strip of burlap hanging to dry. She turned too late. Flames ran up the wall in a streak of orange. Smoke filled her lungs, the heat clawing at her breath. She tried to douse it, but the bucket spilled, useless on the dirt floor. Panic roared louder than the wind. Eli saw the glow from his pasture, a column of orange twisting into the night sky. His heart jolted. Before his mind could think, his body was already moving. He mounted bareback, the horse pounding through mud and frost. When he reached the cabin, fire had eaten half the roof. He didn't stop to shout. He broke the door in with one hard kick, wrapped his coat around her, and carried her into the snow. She coughed, eyes streaming, clutching at his shirt. For a long time, they both just sat there in the dark, the fire's light fading behind them. When the smoke cleared, what stood was ruin. Half a wall, charred beams, her small table turned to ash. Clara stared at it, her voice breaking. "It was all I had." Eli touched her shoulder gently. "Then we'll start again. Together." She didn't argue this time. Didn't tell him she didn't need help. She just nodded and let her head rest against his chest for a moment, breathing in the scent of pine and smoke. The days that followed were quieter. They worked side by side, his hands rough with sawdust, hers steady with the hammer. He cut the logs. She shaped the joints. When her back ached, he said nothing, only placed his canteen near her elbow. When his old wound flared, she fetched the bandages without asking. Between them grew something wordless and kind, like grass pushing up through burnt ground. Martha Boyle rode out one morning with a bundle of bread and coffee. She pretended it was pity, but when she saw them laughing, him trying to fit a window frame while she teased him for crooked lines, her face softened. "Ain't sin in it," she told the others later that evening. "Just two souls tired of ghosts." The cabin rose again, taller, stronger, and inside it, Clara hung new curtains she'd sewn from old sheets. When Eli leaned in to help her hang the last one, his hand brushed hers, and this time, neither moved away. On the last day of the build, he lingered by the fence, hat in hand, eyes shadowed by thoughts he hadn't spoken in years. "I buried my wife and boy on my land," he said finally, voice low. "Since then, I've been walking through life like a man made of smoke. Helping you." It felt like remembering what living was. She looked at him for a long moment, the wind lifting a strand of her hair. "Maybe the Lord left us standing so we could build something again," she whispered. "Not the same, but still home." He nodded, throat tight. She didn't kiss him, didn't need to. Instead, she took his rough hand and laid it against the new cabin wall. Then stay long enough to see it through. Winter faded, and spring came bold and green. Grass reached up through the snowmelt. Wildflowers tangled along the creek. Smoke curled from her chimney again, slow and steady. Children from the town sometimes came to see the garden she'd planted. Eli helped mend neighbors' fences, and when he rode back in the evenings, there was always a lantern waiting in her window. One afternoon, a trader asked Clara straight out, "You and McGraw married yet?" She smiled softly, her hands still in the dirt, and said, "We built what we needed, together." The old narrator's voice might come in here, like the memory of wind through pines. Some love don't come with vows or flowers. Some come quiet, like rain soaking into parched ground. A man and a woman, both broken in their own ways, found enough mercy to keep each other standing. And out in a world that never waited for them, they built something that did. One log, one day, one heartbeat at a time.